Top 5 Worst Planeswalker Cards in War of the Spark. War of the Spark has the most amount of Planeswalkers in any set in Magic's history, with 39 or so total Planeswalker cards counted as part of the set. It fits well flavor-wise with what was supposed to be happening in the lore at the time. It was supposed to be the final battle against long-standing antagonist, Nicol Bolas. Almost every Planeswalker that has been around since the creation of the card type showed up along with a few new ones to boot in this set. The problem is, they can't all be winners, and this list is going over which Planeswalkers should have probably just stayed home rather than shown up for war. Starting with number 5, Jaya the Venerated Fire Mage. While the passive effect's pretty neat, giving a mini boost to red source damage, it misses a key point of mono-red decks, that is being its mana cost. Torbran, a creature card which came out just 2 sets later, had a much better version of the passive effect of Jaya for 1 mana cheaper. 4 mana is pushing the limits of the highest cost that you want to pay in mono-red, because of how few land cards you're going to want to run just to be able to keep applying burn pressure on your opponent. Jaya is just too expensive to be reliable, and the bolt effect isn't that great protection considering it has the high asking price of 5 mana. If it was 1 mana cheaper, it might have actually seen play in Standard, and the card is still somewhat decent in a Torbran, Burn, or Stax commander deck, but otherwise, I don't see any real reason to run it. Let's move on to number 4, Braska the Swarm's Eminence. Blah. I've never thought of there being a Death Touch Matters Planeswalker, but here we are. While Death Touch is somewhat relevant keyword ability, it's usually stuck on something that is way cheaper or way more effective, such as Questing Beast. The biggest problem here is that the abilities on this card have very corner case application. The card might be good if you are constantly playing against Planeswalker tribal decks, but another issue with this card is that you normally want to keep your Death Touch creatures up as blockers to force weird attacks from your opponent, and not throw them at your opponent all willy-nilly. Questing Beast is a different story because the opponent needs to trade a relevant creature or risk dying to it straight up. Overall, Braska Swarm's Eminence is a interesting card, with its tokens having Planeswalker Death Touch, and its mana cost isn't horrible. It's just that there are better cards that you could cast at the 4-drop slot that end up doing way more. Now, let's move on to the truly terrible Planeswalkers from the set. Starting with number 3, Kaeya the Bane of the Dead. If you have a card cost 6 mana, it better do something that's worth the amount of time it would take to cast it. Kaeya the Bane of the Dead is not worth the 6 mana it costs to cast. While exiling a creature without having to worry about hexproof is nice, there's really only 1 or 2 legitimate targets that you would have seen in Standard for this when it was released. Cards like Carnage Tyrant and maybe Nullhide Ferox. And while Carnage Tyrant was a pain for control decks to deal with, it really wasn't worth playing this Planeswalker who might get the opportunity to exile 2 creatures while it's on the field. And if you were really struggling against Nullhide Ferox Turbo, then you would just play a creature nuke like Kaeya's Wrath instead of this. There are just a plethora of better removal pieces that you could play in any format than what you would play this in. To put the final nails in this coffin of a Ghost Hunter, the static effect doesn't do anything 99% of any game that you'd ever play, and at least Jaya had a half-decent static effect, and for this converted mana cost, Planeswalker deck Planeswalkers do more. which is very, very sad. But let's move on to number 2, Watley the Sun's Heart. Here we have a card that just really doesn't serve a purpose. It has a static effect which is similar to that of Arcades from M19, but the difference here is that card can be used as a commander, and it also provides advantage. Watley, the Sun's Heart, is a Toughness Matters Planeswalker with a really bad -3 effect. There's just a lot better ways to gain life than through this effect. Then there also aren't a lot of high toughness creatures that, in conjunction to use with this Planeswalker in the standard of its day. And even in Commander, the effects on this card don't make sense because there's strictly better ways to have a Walls/Toughness Matters card, and the life gain is just negligible considering there's other much better ways to do it. If you wanted to build walls, then just cast Arcades from your command zone, or pretty much do anything but this. Which brings us to number 1. Arlen, the Voice of the Back. This card mixes the worst aspects of everything wrong with Kaeya and Watley together into one card. Kaeya had an overblown cost for what it did, and made it not worth playing, and Watley had low cost but had pointless abilities. Arlen, Voice of the Pack, is an overcosted card with luster effects, and standard-wise, this card's just unplayable. Pay 6 and make a 3/3. That's not good. There's just strictly better mono-green Planeswalkers. And especially in War of the Spark, where there was Nissa Who Shakes the World, where Nissa from War untaps a land, makes it into a 3/3 with haste and vigilance, and also makes it so that forests on your side tap for an additional green mana. And that card only cost 5 mana. Even in Werewolf or Wolf Commander decks, Arlen, Voice of the Pack is still a poor choice because they're just strictly better options than this really, really poor costed card that provides a negligible boost with its static effect and a not relevant body for how late in the game you're expected to cast it. If you want the pump effect, just play an actual Anthem. Just play something like Nightpack Ambusher, play Nissa Who Shakes the World, play any green Planeswalker deck Planeswalker ever over this. This card asks too much to do what will almost always amount to nothing. Well, thank you for watching. Hope you have a nice day and hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.